What's up, everybody? Raees Mohamed here of RM Warner, and we are going to do a live today on Twitter terminations and what is going on. Twitter terminations. Twitter terminations. Going to pin that real quick. Lots to talk about. Never a dull moment with Elon. We're going to invite a guest that we have today, Michael Elkins, who's an attorney. Hey, Michael.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good, man. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you perfectly. We hear you perfectly. So, Michael Elkins, thanks for joining us. I'm Raees. It's nice to meet you. It's the first time we're
too. Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, just kind of jumping right in, we're here to talk about Elon Musk's fiasco with Twitter and his mass terminations. And the guy loves to be in the news. He's a controversial dude, and he is a CEO of Types, very eccentric. I mean, what's going on? Have you been following this pretty closely?
Yeah, really closely. I actually have followed Tesla a while because he's had similar issues with Tesla. He's had WARN Act issues. We're going to talk about that. That relates to the layoffs with Tesla. He also had a bunch of employment discrimination issues. I think Tesla had a massive adverse verdict for race discrimination. And then recently I posted on LinkedIn about a cause finding from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And now here we are with Twitter. He's looking at similar WARN Act issues, although I'm not 100% sure he's violated the WARN Act, but we'll get into it, get into all the specifics. So yes, very, very familiar.
Awesome. So just to set the stage for everybody who's joining us and who's going to watch this now and watch it later, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, basically what happens is, Elon Musk, who obviously was in a legal battle when he revoked his offer to buy Twitter to begin with, ultimately comes back and says, and I think it was in April, May, hey, I'm going to buy $44 billion deal. I'm taking Twitter private.
Correct.
So he takes the company private, and immediately after closing, sometime late October, he announces, I'm gutting the company. And so
Correct.
He basically fires, or is in the process of firing, 3,500 employees?
Correct. Somewhere around there.
And
yep.
Yeah, and the legitimate gripe that I think these employees have is like, dude, no notice, and most people just got locked out. What I'm reading is most of these workers just got locked out of their accounts and received a memo to their personal email basically saying, we're gutting the company, see you later. And that's a problem. We're going to talk about that in a second. But, Elon Musk's whole shtick right now is, I'm going to make this company super profitable. And his banner ad right now is, if you want a blue check, mail me a green check, right? Basically.
Yeah. He's charging for the verification, which is kind of interesting.
So tell me, sort of now that we've set the landscape, what's the problem with the termination? Can't he, now that he's the owner of a large private company, just say, see you later, don't show up? What's the problem?
Yeah, he can actually. I mean, it's not a publicly traded company, and even if it was, there's no special rules for terminations for publicly traded versus privately held. The issue that Elon has with these terminations comes under a federal law that's called the WARN Act, W-A-R-N, and California has a very similar state law provision as well. So keep it very simple, the WARN Act is a law that says if you're firing or laying off, like a mass layoff or a certain amount of people, you have to provide them 60 days notice. And the law triggers in one of two ways. One, you have a plant closing or a location closing. The law was written a long time ago when they used the term plant. That's not the case with Twitter. No sites are closing that I'm aware of. Or you have a mass layoff. That's what's going on here, mass layoff. So the WARN Act applies. We have a mass layoff. For Twitter, it's 500 or more employees. That triggers a mass layoff. That's what's triggering it for Twitter. There are also situations under the WARN Act where if you have, I think it's 49 to 499 people being laid off, it would apply if that number constitutes 33% or more of the workforce, which at the end of the day, either one is applying for Twitter. Now, Musk, and what you have to do is you have to give them 60 days notice, but there's a very interesting legal issue here. Musk has said that everybody who's been laid off has been offered a severance package where they would get paid 3 months. Now, that would be in exchange for a waiver and a release. So Twitter's going to take the legal position that the 3-month payment is effectively what we would call pay in lieu of notice, which is an old common law concept. And I tell a lot of clients sometimes, like, look, if you're cutting somebody loose, maybe you want to throw them a couple bucks to avoid a pay in lieu of notice claim. We don't really have that in Florida, but there's a few outlier cases. And, you know, but the interesting issue here is he's requiring a waiver and release. There should be no waiver and release under the WARN Act. The WARN Act is if you qualify, you got to give them 60 days notice. Now, you're supposed to give them notice, but I would presume if you just paid someone for 60 days, no waiver and release, that's probably going to be compliant. So it's very interesting. The other issue, and this is really, I think, the big one. If we go to the lawsuit against Tesla, which was under the WARN Act, remember when he cut a bunch of people? I think it was at the Texas office. The legal issue, Musk raised, or Tesla raised, 2 issues in that case. One was it wasn't a mass layoff. These were performance-based terminations, so the WARN Act wouldn't apply. It doesn't really matter for the Twitter issue. But the second issue is all those employees had arbitration agreements. And the federal judge in that case recently compelled arbitration in those cases, which is a huge win for Tesla. My understanding is, I don't know this directly, but just from reading what I would consider reputable media outlets, is most of the employees that are getting cut all had arbitration agreements. So the legal battle is going to be twofold. One, we offered them pay in lieu of notice, although there's a waiver provision, there's a severance part there, a waiver part. And 2, it doesn't really matter. You got to send all these cases to arbitration. And if they go to arbitration, you know, I mean, maybe they fight it, maybe they don't. We'll see. I know the lawsuit that was filed, the class action recently filed, is seeking an injunction, or they're trying to get an injunction to prevent Twitter from enticing people to sign waivers and releases. Not sure how that's going to shake out, but really fascinating. So we'll see.
It's super interesting because, going back to the WARN Act for a second, it's my understanding that the WARN Act, the federal statute, applies to employers that are 100 people or over, right? So that's one of the hurdles.
California is 70, and California is 75. So it
perfect.
Applies.
Clear. And the other interesting thing, like exactly what you said, Elon seems to have a pattern. Again, he's an aggressive business guy, and we'll talk about both sides of this in a second. But in the lawsuit, the class action against Tesla, I believe the judge also ruled that his agreement that he had his employees sign was misleading, right? It was
Correct.
It was overbroad. There were waiver provisions that, you know, an average reasonable person would not have understood. And so that's part of the legal battle in this case too, I think that's going to be.
Yeah, I read about that ruling recently. And I think the issue there was whether the agreements could be introduced, or if they were, I'm not sure the 100% what was going on there, but I do remember that. I think the issue though about sending it to arbitration just happened. I just learned of that this morning when I was just doing a little research for our talk today. So now look, that's Texas, different, right? Different world. I understand it's federal court, but still a different world. California, look, employee friendly. I mean, at the end of the day, California is the most employee-friendly state in the country by far. So we'll see how that shakes out. I think what's interesting, again, is he's taking the legal position, I'm offering more than what the WARN Act would require, right? 3 months versus 60 days. But the plaintiffs are taking the legal position, yeah, but that's not the same thing because you're requiring a waiver and a release. Now,
that's right.
I also understand that there was WARN Act paperwork filed with the appropriate agencies in California. I haven't seen that paperwork. That's just what I saw reported. And I think they referenced the offer to pay the 3 months. So, you know, I don't know if he's going to face any blowback from California state agencies. Probably. I mean, I'm not a California lawyer, but I'm pretty familiar with California employment law in that sense. So we'll see what happens, but it's a pretty interesting dynamic. He doesn't really care at the end of the day.
Yeah. At the end of the day, for him, this is a business decision that he seems very comfortable with. He's got the playbook. He's kind of like cost of doing business, whatever. I mean, he started from the top down, firing chief executives first, and then like cutting everybody. You know what's interesting is I read that this has not been certified as a class yet, right? There's I think
No,
4 or 5
filed.
plaintiffs. Exactly.
Filed as a class. We'll see if he gets class cert. I would imagine if the severance package is worth it, some people are going to say, "I'll take the money and run." If there's an arbitration agreement, I would bet my dog that it encompasses class claims, and
Yeah.
those are agreements that were signed before any of this happened. I would be floored if Twitter employees all weren't signing these types of agreements already, long before Musk got there. And if that's the case, then good luck. You're not going to have a class. You're going to end up in arbitration, and that's it. It's going to be gutted. Then it'll be, if people want to pursue an individual claim in arbitration, good luck.
The other thing that's interesting is there's a lot of case law in the Ninth Circuit where we litigate relating to the enforceability of arbitration provisions, consumer-facing agreements, and waiver of class claims. And generally speaking, you can waive, as a consumer or as an employee, you can waive being part of a class. But it'll be interesting to see if those are arguments that are made, right? Like, we need our day in court, we want a jury trial, we want X number of damages, because the scale at which this has happened was significant. And I think you're exactly right. I don't see 3,000 people looking to go hire 3,000 different lawyers. I think it's burdensome. People are intimidated. I'm taking on Twitter. So I think many people are going to take the dough. It's just an easier thing to do, right?
Yeah, I think so. And also, think about the Ninth Circuit, right? I mean, I don't practice there, but certainly follow it. That used to be like a really employee-friendly forum, and it's turned very differently, I think, in the last 6 years, right? To a more employer-friendly forum. It's certainly not as employee-friendly as it used to be, is my understanding from talking to fellow L&E lawyers across the country, management lawyers like myself. And look, arbitration agreements are really hard to get around. They just are. The U.S. Supreme Court's already said they're enforceable. We've seen courts, in Florida, they enforce them routinely, but we're a very, very employer-friendly jurisdiction, both state level and the 11th Circuit. We've seen it in sports. I do a lot with sports law, and the NFL constantly compelling arbitration and usually succeeding, with one exception in the John Gruden case. But we'll see what happens in Brian Flores' case. So I got to imagine Twitter's employees, again, I don't know personally, but that they have these arbitration agreements, that there's a class claim waiver in them, and that would encompass the WARN Act. And if that is the case, then I'm not sure these plaintiffs are going to get very far. Now, you get the right judge, says I'm not enforcing them, I still don't think they'll get very far, because Twitter will take an appeal. They'll slow it down for a while. So we'll see what happens.
Let's talk about the other side of this. The other side of it is you've got an activist CEO. You just bought a company, not inexpensively. You have a bunch of debt. I mean, for those who don't know how he came up, this wasn't Elon forking out a bunch of cash. He borrowed a bunch of money. He's got the backing of some significant institutional lenders. And so he's like, dude, revenue positive. Like, I need to get revenue positive. I need to post massive net. And it's usually these kind of deals, and we do transactional work too, but a lot of these deals at this scale, they require debt covenants or covenants of profit and loss ratios. So he's under a lot of pressure. What about the idea that, look, he's doing what a CEO should do, which is be responsible to the stakeholders and make this a profitable company? What do you think of that argument? In
terms of getting around lawsuits, or just as a general concept?
Just generally, just as a theme.
That's what I thought. Look, I've been in a few M&A deals in the past. I worked on the sale of the Philadelphia 76ers back in 2011 or 12, and you're absolutely right. In those types of deals on that kind of a scale, the bottom line is you have to make it profitable. I don't know what his debt covenants are, but they're probably significant. I think, though, this particular way of going about it, I'm not sure his stakeholders care one way or the other, but he's certainly not engendering any good faith here, right? With his culture, with any culture building. Now, whether culture building and profit go hand in hand, that's a philosophical debate, right? As he certainly has Twitter in the news, and we'll see what happens with the $8. I predict that the blue checkmark people are going to pay the $8. They're all complaining about it, but I bet you most pay. We'll see, though. So I think it makes sense that he's going to be responsible because he doesn't want to get kicked out. And I would imagine a lot of the people in this deal are not friendlies to him either. They're probably in the deal for other reasons, right?
Yeah.
I know that I think his biggest investor is someone from Saudi Arabia, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure what family it is, but I thought I had read that.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot of pressure. And also, who knows if he cut key people that were helping with revenue? It doesn't. My thought is this: you want to get rid of a bunch of people, go for it. You own the company. You can do that. But what was the analysis to get rid of these people?
Mm-hmm.
How could that have been done in this short period of time? And I don't think that he did it before he bought the company. I'm sure there was something done during the due diligence period, but they spent a lot of time in litigation when he was like, no, I don't want to do it anymore. So what was the analysis on who to let go and how that all fits in? It seems like he just slashed half the staff, and he slashed all the executives too.
Yeah.
So
he must have, and this is the scary part. I mean, most of what Elon does, he's thought through. I mean, it's not like he's not an intelligent guy, but it's interesting because he hasn't announced who he's replacing these executives with that I've heard. He hasn't.
Right.
And if I'm running a private company that's in the public eye, like Twitter, I'm coming out and saying, yeah, I axed all these guys, but look who I'm putting in their place, these rock stars. Here's my all-star team. Boom, boom, boom. And people are like, oh. But like you said, he doesn't seem to care about the culture. Like,
nope.
He's not, for him, this is, I'm looking at a bottom line number. I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm going to fire who I want, and I have a plan that I haven't disclosed on how I'm going to get there, right?
And I would also, I kind of thought of it this way. Like, obviously he's brilliant. No, I'm not questioning that. And I'm sure whatever he does is well thought out. But there are a lot of brilliant people out there, a lot of people that were successful that are not always brilliant for one reason. They want people that are going to always agree with them. I don't know Elon Musk, but he strikes me as one of those people who says, I want Elon-friendly people around me. I'm always very concerned about that. If your team around you is always going to tell you yes because they're afraid you'll stab them, cut them loose if they tell you no, that to me can be problematic. And maybe that's great when you're building something like building Tesla from the ground up, or certainly for me building up my law firm. I'm not really interested too much in somebody being hired who's going to tell me no all the time, but that's different. But when you're talking about Twitter, it seems to me you would want a group of people around you that respect you, but respect you enough to differ sometimes and say, listen, I get it, you're a smart guy, but maybe this isn't the right move. So that's my concern with it also.
It's interesting because he is, in his own words, he is an absolutist with free speech. So it's coming at a really interesting intersection, right? Because on one hand, he's saying, I don't care what you think. You got to be a yes ma'am or kiss the ring. On the other hand, he's like, I'm going to turn this platform into a war room of ideas, literally at the intersection of Kanye West, or Ye, as he's known. Right? Lord. And so now it's like the amount of abusive posts now has just skyrocketed, anti-Semitic, racist, bigotry. It's everybody's on the platform. Maybe that's what he wants. Maybe that's part of his grand plan, that I'm going to bring a certain type of person and personality to Twitter. Twitter was already liberal, but they used to ban accounts. I've been in lawsuits. Like, we do a lot of defamation work, harassment, cyber stuff. We've had cases where we produce a judgment or an order or significant, harm happening, and Twitter may honor it. They're the last in line. They may honor it, but now it's a free for all, right? I mean, this is going to be.
I always laugh at the free speech mantra when it comes to social media platforms. First of all, there's no free speech in the private world. You can say whatever you want, but there are consequences to that, right? Free speech applies to the government can't censor you. But I do a ton of government work. I represent a lot of municipalities, and even the government, we always have to be careful with First Amendment issues when we're dealing with employees, but even that's not absolute. So I feel like Elon's free speech is more like, I just want it to be a free for all with no rules and no restrictions. And hey, that's great. You can have that platform. It's kind of sad that that's what Twitter might turn into. I mean, Elon himself is tweeting baseless conspiracy theories, by the way, about Pelosi's husband, what happened to him. I mean, it's nonsense. It's crazy and dangerous. and he doesn't seem to care about that. I mean, certainly we kind of know where he leans, obviously. And so I think from a, well, how can I put it? Not necessarily a decency standpoint, but maybe that's the right word. But even from a business standpoint, you're going to let your platform become a free-for-all of misinformation, conspiracy theories, and as you just said, what I would call sort of hate posts that are happening. That seems to me to be problematic. Listen, if that's what you want, you're entitled to do it, but I don't call that free speech. That term, Elon uses it, and people that want to say all the crap they want to say use it, but it's not an accurate term. Free speech is a constitutional concept of the government interfering in certain types of speech. It does not mean say whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want. Nobody can do anything about it.
There's the saying, which actually comes out of an old case, I think in Virginia, which is you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. That's not protected
speech. That's from the U.S. Supreme Court.
That's right.
I think that's one of the seminal free speech cases. Is you can't just say whatever you want whenever you want. But it is his platform now, so he can allow all that stuff. I'm just not sure that's a good business strategy.
What's super interesting, let's go back to one of the owners. So an early investor in Twitter was the Saudi prince Al-Walid bin Talal Abdulaziz, right? Mm-hmm. So he's an activist Saudi investor. He's bought many shares in many U.S. companies. Citigroup, he put like $600 million in. So he is the second largest private shareholder of Twitter. He owns, between him and Kingdom Holdings, he owns about 5%, which sounds like a small amount, but it's almost $2 billion.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about it is Saudi is not exactly known for being free speech advocates. Now, Prince Walid is a different personality. Like he's more a moderate, if you want to say it that way. But super interesting in terms of the direction this platform is going to go, right? Like it's very mishmash right now. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense. But look, sometimes out of controversy, he's getting a lot of PR. He's going to attract certain kinds of people. To go back to your point, I don't know that he wants those types of people to be, I don't think he wants to be that platform, like a Parler type of anything goes, one of those types of apps. I don't know. It's really mind-boggling.
You know, the way he talks, though, it certainly seems like he would allow that. And I'm not on Parler. I won't even download the app, but I've seen what's on there, you know, through other posts. You know, it's pretty known, especially on TikTok. People go back and forth. Some of the stuff on Parler is just downright awful. People are literally threatening violence against other people. And hopefully that's not what Twitter becomes. That is not free speech. You know, that crap should not be allowed. I really don't care what side of the aisle you're on. Advocating violence, you know, the anti-Semitic stuff from Kanye or whatever the hell his name is, and Kyrie. I mean, all that stuff, it's problematic. It's not free speech. If you want to do that, certainly there are places to go do it. I certainly hope Elon does not let Twitter become that, but I think I'm wrong. I think it's going to become that.
I know Twitter, you know, again, political controversies are interesting from just a legal analysis standpoint, but like people would say, oh, the conservative viewpoints get censored on Twitter. You know, so I've read that a lot of the, you know, conservative activists, however you want to call them, ultra sides, right? Not talking about the middle of the road, but ultras, they're like applauding this, saying this is fantastic, no more censorship. Like, but I think that then bleeds into a misinformation and disinformation campaign. So now I view this as like, if you want to get lost in the metaverse of just bad bullshit, now Twitter is going to be the place to go, right? Like people who are on mushrooms tweeting about, you know, the end of times and flat earthers and all this nonsense. That's what it's going to be.
Yeah, and you mentioned it earlier, and you hit the nail on the head. I think the rise in like misinformation posts and conspiracy theories and all the hashtags that go along with like the craziness of QAnon and all that garbage, I believe that that's all increased exponentially now on Twitter. And that's a problem. And I get it. You can't, where do you draw the line, right? With what's, you know, sort of ideas and what's misinformation. I understand that there's a fine line there. I get it. But some of it's obviously not a fine line. The conspiracy theory stuff about Pelosi's husband is garbage. It's all
Terrible.
nonsense. It's all
Yeah.
nonsense. The guy confessed. The husband, I forget his name, was in the hospital. It's all crap. And so that's not really, to me, a hard line to delineate. And it doesn't really matter to me what side of the political aisle you're on. If you're tweeting garbage out like, oh, it was an inside job, give me a break. Like, that doesn't belong out there.
The sad part is you magnetize the other crazies. Like we saw with Kanye, when he came out, what happened? It magnetized all the other crazies and gave them a platform. I mean, you had people doing Nazi salutes in bars on the bridges with swastikas. It's like, dude, come on. Yeah. Is this where we are as a society? We took a gigantic step back in the name of free speech. I mean, that's wild to me. So,
same thing with Kyrie.
Yeah, no, 100%. My prediction with Twitter is that it's going to, 6 months to a year, it's going to be a complete shit show. It's going to be a mess. It's not going to be managed well. I think if Elon is smart, he's going to call on his other tech buddies and his friends to say, I need some smart people in place. And those smart people need to be able to tell Elon, listen, dude, this is how you want to do it. If you want, like, give him an angle that's revenue facing. It says, if you want to be a platform that's going to attract advertisement, it's going to attract people who are going to pay money to use it, etc. You need to do this. You need to turn it into this. And hopefully that this is a little more of a moderated platform versus a crazy free-for-all that attracts extremists.
You know, I have no problem with his ideas to monetize it. I think that that's a great thing. And Twitter has certainly not done well with that over the years. I don't know if paying money for the blue check makes a lot of sense, but that's a different debate. But no issue with monetization whatsoever. They need to monetize it, and they should. It's a private company. It should make money. But I'm not so sure Elon is the type of guy. Don't know him. I'm just going off what I see in the media. Who's really interested, right, in bringing in a bunch of people that are gonna help him figure out how to keep Twitter from becoming like a total shit show. And he should be careful because there are a lot of other competitors out there. You know, Twitter's interesting because it's a nice place to get your news sort of in a very concise, segregated manner. But if the people bringing that news find other ways to do it, whether it's Instagram or TikTok, I know TikTok's very different, or back to Facebook, I mean, they'll do it. And people have a lot of choice now when it comes to these platforms. It's not, you know, certainly you do a lot on social media. I do a lot on social media. I got to imagine you're not on just one platform, right? We're all maximizing. It's a cross section of stuff. I'm glad I didn't build my brand on Twitter. That's the one platform I said I'm just going to use for my own personal fun. But there are other choices out there. So we'll see what happens. I think it's a unique opportunity, honestly, for Facebook to get back to relevancy if they can take advantage of it. Different conversation, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. I was going to say I think other platforms are salivating at the mouth of how can I get into this market share. And I think that people who left the company, particularly these executives, high-level engineers,
good point,
they have an incentive to start another platform that competes with Twitter. And I still don't think...
Such a good point.
Right? I don't think social media platforms are... So I don't think that market is so saturated. There's a lot going on there, but stuff fizzles out. Like Clubhouse was hot, and then I don't know what happened with Clubhouse. I haven't heard from it again. Parler was great, and then Parler got hit with nasty conspiracies, and people who stormed the Capitol used it to communicate, and that went from 15 million users to like less than 1 million. So stuff moved around. The gigantic brands like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, they're still king of the hill. So there's still an opportunity here potentially for these guys to come together and say, we have the know-how and we're going to stick the middle finger to Elon and here's how we're going to do it. That's what I would be doing if I were them.
You know, that is a great point. Honestly, that's not a point I even thought of, but I think that's spot on. I got to imagine of the 3,700 people he let go, there's probably a lot of smart people in that bunch who probably have access to a lot of funding. And one thing about social media is there's always room for a competitor. That's been happening since the beginning of social media, like Facebook, then there was Instagram, then LinkedIn, TikTok. I mean, and there's never been really a competitor for Twitter with the sort of that kind of a news feed format like that. But if someone does start something and they can get some of the blue check mark, the top blue check mark people to move over, and they can get politicians to move over, and they can get sports, sports writers and whatever it is, it could be interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's a mistake if Twitter thinks our game is the only game. That would be a huge mistake. That would be the one mistake he's made. He's always done pretty well, but even Tesla's facing competition now. Tesla's not the only game in town anymore. A lot
they're
of
vulnerable.
cars.
And one thing we know is people talk with their money. And if they don't like the culture, they don't like the principles that are attributed to a company, they're not going to do business there. There's too many options. And I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see that with Twitter. And I think we've already started to see that with Tesla.
I also think if he allows the crazy, wacko, conspiracy theorist stuff to promulgate on Twitter, regular people who understand that stuff is nonsense are not going to continue to use that platform because they just don't want to be exposed to it. And there's a lot more, I think, regular people. I consider myself sort of like a moderate regular. Like, I don't want to be exposed to conspiracy crap. I don't care what side of the aisle it's on, the right or the left. I just don't want to deal with it. I'll go somewhere else. It's just, I won't pay money to a platform that's going to allow that type of garbage. And I think a lot of people, regular people that'll drive revenue, that's what revenue drives from regular, I hate to say it, regular schmucks like us, right? Like me. I mean, not like us, but like me.
No. Like, we're in the same boat. And I think if you're a content creator and the audience is primarily made up of certain types of rotten apples, who are you pitching to? Who are you throwing your content? Would you rather get, the middle of the road sliver and a good aggregate number of people who are reasonable, or do you want a platform that's known for crazies? And,
I understand viewpoints. I'm comfortable with everybody's viewpoint. You want to have a civil discourse, let's just say on an economic policy, right? Why policy A is better than policy B, or I don't like this particular person's policy for these sort of fact-based reasons. I'm down for that, even if I don't agree with your policy argument. But when you start bringing me these nut job conspiracy theories about Pelosi's husband and all this crap, I got to go. And I think a lot of regular people feel that way. And that's a vulnerability for Twitter.
Right there with you. Michael, this was awesome, man. We could talk for hours and hours, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot more to talk about with Twitter and Elon at the helm and what's going on. So really appreciate you jumping on. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll definitely be in touch. We'll download this video so you can share it with your audience later in the future. Do you have a YouTube channel as well?
I don't. Everyone tells me I need to have a YouTube channel, and I've never done one. The two places I'm sort of not super active is Twitter. I use for my personal stuff, like to track sports, and I'm not on YouTube other than to search fun videos. But it's on my very, very short list to develop finally.
Still a good platform. Yeah, still a good platform, especially YouTube Shorts, because they're competing with TikTok and Instagram Reels. So still a great platform. But dude, thanks a lot for taking time out on Saturday to join. Man. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you bringing me on. Thanks, buddy.
We'll be in touch.
All right. Talk soon.
See ya.
See ya.